The Duke had been dead for only 3 days when soldiers arrested a 17-year-old stable boy outside Blackthorne Castle. That alone should not have mattered. People were arrested every day in the kingdom. Thieves, poachers, drunkards, desperate peasants trying to survive another winter. But this arrest was different. Because by sunset, men who had served the crown for decades would swear they had witnessed the exact moment the kingdom's future began to unravel. And it started in the royal graveyard. Rain fell steadily across the hills surrounding Blackthorne Castle. The kind of cold rain that seemed determined to soak through skin and bone. The funeral crowds had long since dispersed. The nobles had returned to their estates. The priests had completed their prayers. Only the guards remained. Their duty was simple. Protect the Duke's tomb until the official mourning period ended. No one entered. No one left. No exceptions. At least, that was the order. Just before dawn, Captain Rowan Voss noticed movement near the crypt. At first he assumed it was an animal. A fox. A stray dog. Perhaps even a wolf. But then the figure stepped into the torchlight. A boy. Young. Thin. Dressed in muddy work clothes. He looked more like a farmhand than a criminal. Yet he was standing directly beside the most heavily guarded tomb in the kingdom. Rowan immediately drew his sword. On your knees. The boy didn't move. Did you hear me? Still nothing. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just strange. His face showed no fear. No panic. No urgency. Only sadness. The kind of sadness that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. Within moments, 6 soldiers surrounded him. Steel glinted beneath the rain. Crossbows were raised. The boy finally lifted his eyes. And Rowan felt an unexpected chill. Not because of what he saw. Because of who the boy resembled. For a brief moment, he saw the Duke. The resemblance lasted only a second. Yet it was enough to unsettle him. The same dark eyes. The same sharp jawline. The same stubborn expression. Impossible. The Duke had no children. Everyone knew that. Who are you? Rowan demanded. The boy remained silent. A soldier grabbed him. Another searched his pockets. Nothing. No weapon. No tools. No stolen valuables. Which raised an even more troubling question. Why was he there? Then Rowan noticed something clenched tightly inside the boy's fist. Open your hand. The boy looked down. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear of losing whatever he was holding. Open it, Rowan repeated. Slowly. Reluctantly. The boy obeyed. And every soldier immediately stepped backward. The ring rested in his palm. A heavy gold signet ring engraved with the crest of House Blackthorne. The Duke's ring. The Duke's personal seal. The ring that should have been buried with him. The ring Rowan himself had watched priests place upon the Duke's finger during the funeral. A ring no living person should have possessed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The rain continued falling. The wind howled across the graveyard. Yet silence seemed to consume everything. Rowan stared at the ring. His heartbeat quickened. There was only one explanation. Someone had opened the tomb. Someone had violated the Duke's grave. A crime punishable by death. His gaze returned to the boy. Where did you get that? The boy swallowed. Nothing. Answer me. Still silence. One of the younger soldiers stepped forward. We should take him to the dungeon. Another nodded. He probably had help. Maybe grave robbers. Maybe rebels. Maybe. No. The voice came from the boy. Soft. Barely audible. Yet every soldier fell silent. Rowan narrowed his eyes. "Know what?" The boy looked directly at him. The tomb was never opened. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. "What did you say?" The tomb was never opened. A knot formed in Rowan's stomach. Because the boy wasn't lying. At least, he didn't appear to be. "Then explain the ring." The boy lowered his head. For several moments, he seemed to be fighting some internal battle. As though speaking would unleash consequences he could no longer control. Finally, he looked up. And uttered 6 words. 6 words that would nearly destroy the kingdom. "The Duke was my father." Silence. Absolute silence. Then laughter erupted. Harsh. Mocking. Disbelieving. One soldier nearly doubled over. Another shook his head. Even Rowan almost laughed. Almost. Because the boy wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to provoke anyone. He genuinely believed what he had said. And somehow that made it far more disturbing. The Duke had no children. The Duchess herself had confirmed it countless times. Years of marriage had produced no heir. It was one of the kingdom's greatest tragedies. Everyone knew it. Everyone. Yet the boy remained calm. Steady. Certain. "What is your name?" Rowan asked. "Thomas." "Thomas what?" The boy hesitated. Then answered. "Thomas Blackthorne." The laughter stopped immediately. Every soldier stared. Because that name carried enormous weight. Not merely a family name. A dynasty. A bloodline. Power. History. The name of men who had shaped kingdoms. And now a stable boy was claiming it as his own. "You're either incredibly brave," Rowan said quietly. "Or incredibly foolish." Thomas looked toward the crypt. Toward the stone beneath which the Duke lay buried. "No." His voice cracked. For the first time, genuine emotion surfaced. "I think I'm just too late." Something about those words unsettled Rowan more than the ring. Too late. Too late for what? Before he could ask, thunder shook the valley. And far above them, inside Blackthorne Castle, a bell suddenly began ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times. Every guard froze. The emergency bell. Nobody touched that bell without reason. Rowan's blood ran cold. Because the bell wasn't ringing from the gate. Or the walls. Or the barracks. It was coming from the Duke's private tower. The tower that had been sealed since his death. The tower that should have been completely empty. The tower where no one was supposed to be. A moment later, a terrified servant appeared on the castle steps. Running. Screaming. Nearly falling as he descended. When he finally reached them, he could barely breathe. Rowan grabbed his shoulders. What happened? The servant looked ready to faint. The study. What about it? The man swallowed hard. His face had become ghostly pale. There was a letter. Rowan frowned. What letter? The servant's eyes shifted toward Thomas. Then toward the Duke's tomb. Then back again. As though struggling to comprehend what he had witnessed. Finally, he spoke. The Duke's desk was empty after his death. Yes. We searched it ourselves. Yes. The servant's lips trembled. Then this morning. He paused. His voice barely rose above a whisper. A new letter appeared. The rain suddenly felt colder. Rowan's grip tightened. What did it say? The servant stared directly at Thomas. And answered. It said. His voice cracked. If my son ever returns to Blackthorne Castle, trust no one. For the first time since his arrest, Thomas looked terrified. For several seconds after the servant finished speaking, nobody moved. The rain continued to fall. The wind hissed through the graveyard. Yet Captain Rowan Voss barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on Thomas. The boy's face had gone pale. Not the pale color of fear. The pale color of recognition. As though he already knew exactly what the letter contained. And that troubled Rowan more than anything else. Because if the letter truly came from the Duke, then someone had been lying. Perhaps for years. "Take him inside," Rowan ordered. The soldiers immediately obeyed. 2 guards moved to Thomas's sides. Yet neither touched him. The atmosphere had changed. Only minutes earlier, Thomas had been a suspected grave robber. Now he was something else entirely. A mystery. A dangerous one. As they climbed the winding path toward Blackthorne Castle, Rowan couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The Duke was dead. That much was certain. He had seen the body himself. Had stood beside the coffin. Had watched the burial. Yet somehow the dead man seemed to be reaching back from the grave. First the ring. Now the letter. What came next? The castle gates opened slowly. Massive iron hinges groaned like wounded beasts. Thomas stared upward. Blackthorne Castle rose above him like a mountain of stone. Dark towers pierced the clouds. Ancient walls stretched across the cliffs. For centuries it had stood as a symbol of power. To most people, seeing it for the first time inspired awe. To Thomas, it inspired something else. Sadness. A strange, unexpected sadness. Rowan noticed. "You've never been here before." Thomas hesitated. "No." But Rowan wasn't convinced. Something in the boy's eyes suggested familiarity. As if he were looking at a place from a forgotten dream. The moment they entered the courtyard, whispers began spreading. Servants stopped working. Stable hands abandoned their tasks. Kitchen workers gathered at windows. Everywhere they looked, people were staring. Word traveled fast inside castles. And impossible stories traveled fastest of all. The Duke's secret son. The rumor was already alive. By sunset it would infect every corner of the kingdom. By tomorrow it would reach the capital. And by next week it might reach the king himself. The thought made Rowan's stomach tighten. Because kings rarely welcomed surprises. Especially ones involving inheritance. The servant who had discovered the letter led them through the castle. His hands trembled continuously. Twice he nearly dropped the lantern. Finally they reached the northern tower. The Duke's private quarters. The very rooms nobody had entered since his death. 2 guards stood outside the study. Both appeared shaken. One crossed himself as Rowan approached. That alone was unusual. Soldiers did not frighten easily. "What happened?" Rowan asked. The older guard swallowed. "The desk was empty." "I know." "It was completely empty." Rowan frowned. "And now?" The guard glanced toward the study door. "As God is my witness, Captain." His voice lowered. "The letter wasn't there yesterday." A chill crawled along Rowan's spine. He pushed open the door. The study greeted him with silence. The Duke's scent still lingered faintly in the room. Old books. Ink. Leather. Wood smoke. For a brief moment it felt as though the Duke had merely stepped outside and would return at any moment. The desk stood beside a large window overlooking the valley. Everything appeared untouched. Orderly. Neat. Exactly as it had been after the funeral. Except for one thing. A single folded letter. Resting perfectly in the center of the desk. Waiting. Rowan approached cautiously. The closer he came, the harder his heart pounded. Because he knew the desk. He had searched it personally after the Duke's death. Nothing had been there. Nothing. Yet now the letter sat openly in plain sight. Not hidden. Not concealed. Almost as though someone wanted it to be found. Thomas suddenly stopped walking. Rowan turned. The boy was staring at the letter. His breathing had become shallow. "Do you recognize it?" Thomas nodded slowly. "How?" The boy swallowed. "Because that's his handwriting." Silence. Several people exchanged nervous glances. "You knew the Duke's handwriting?" Rowan asked carefully. Thomas immediately realized his mistake. Too late. The damage was done. "I?" His voice faltered. "I saw letters before." "What letters?" "My mother's." The room became very quiet. Rowan studied him. The answer felt genuine. Yet it created even more questions. Before he could ask another, the study door opened. An elderly man entered. Tall. Thin. Silver-haired. His robes marked him as a royal historian. Professor Aldrich Thorne. One of the kingdom's foremost experts on noble records. The crown trusted him to verify everything from royal decrees to inheritance claims. If anyone could identify the handwriting, it was him. Aldrich approached the desk. His expression carried mild irritation. The look of a scholar dragged away from important work. That irritation vanished the moment he saw the letter. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face. And for the first time in anyone's memory, Professor Aldrich looked afraid. "Professor?" Rowan asked. No response. The old historian moved closer. Slowly. Almost reluctantly. Then he examined the wax seal. His hand began trembling. "Impossible." "What is?" Aldrich looked up. "There is only one person in the kingdom capable of producing this seal." "The Duke?" "Yes." The room fell silent again. The professor carefully opened the letter. Everyone watched. Nobody breathed. Aldrich read the first line. Then the second. Then the third. Suddenly his hand slipped. The paper nearly fell. Rowan caught it. "What does it say?" The old historian stared at him. Horror filled his eyes. Not confusion. Not surprise. Horror. The Duke wrote this. Rowan frowned. "You're certain?" "Without question." A murmur spread throughout the room. Thomas remained silent. Watching. Waiting. As though he had feared this confirmation all along. Rowan extended his hand. "Let me see it." Aldrich hesitated. Then surrendered the letter. Rowan began reading. His eyes moved across the page. The first line seemed ordinary enough. Until he reached the final paragraph. Then his pulse quickened. Because the message wasn't addressed to the Duchess. Or the King. Or the castle staff. It was addressed to him. Captain Rowan Voss. The letter knew his name. The dead Duke had written directly to him. The final lines read, "If you are reading this, then I am already dead." A cold knot formed in Rowan's stomach. His eyes continued moving. "And if Thomas Blackthorne stands before you, events have unfolded exactly as I feared." The room seemed to shrink. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Rowan kept reading. "Trust neither titles nor crowns." His pulse hammered. "Some of those closest to me serve another master." The captain felt sweat forming despite the cold. Then came the final sentence. The sentence that changed everything. The sentence that made Professor Aldrich nearly collapse. The sentence that would soon place every person in the room in danger. Rowan read it twice. Then a third time. Unable to believe what he was seeing. Because according to the date written at the bottom of the page, the Duke had signed the letter 6 days after his official death. And beneath the signature was one final warning. A warning directed at Thomas. A warning written by a man who should already have been in the grave. Run before they discover you are not the only heir. Scene 2. For several long seconds after Rowan finished reading the letter, nobody in the study spoke. The words seemed to linger in the air like a curse. Run before they discover you are not the only heir. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Inside, every face had turned pale. Thomas felt as though the floor beneath him had disappeared. Not the only heir. The sentence echoed inside his mind. Again. And again. And again. His entire life had been built around a single question. Who was his father? Now, within a matter of hours, that question had transformed into something far more dangerous. Who was the other heir? And why had the Duke feared them? Captain Rowan carefully folded the letter. His instincts as a soldier screamed that something was terribly wrong. Not merely suspicious. Not merely unusual. Wrong. The kind of wrong that preceded bloodshed. Before he could speak, another sound echoed through the hallway. Footsteps. Measured. Deliberate. Approaching the study. Every servant immediately stiffened. Professor Aldrich lowered his eyes. Even the guards outside straightened their posture. Only one person commanded that kind of reaction. The door opened. And Duchess Eleanor Blackthorne entered. The room instantly belonged to her. She wore a black morning gown embroidered with silver thread. No jewels. No crown. No display of wealth. Yet she carried herself with such authority that none of those things seemed necessary. At 48 years old, Eleanor remained one of the most respected and feared women in the kingdom. Kings had sought her counsel. Nobles had feared her judgment. Merchants had crossed entire continents to secure her favor. For 27 years she had stood beside Duke Edmund Blackthorne. Not merely as a wife. As a partner. An equal. A force. And now she was a widow. Her blue eyes scanned the room. Immediately noticing the tension. The fear. The uncertainty. Then her gaze landed on Thomas. Everything changed. Only slightly. So slightly that nobody else noticed. Nobody except Rowan. A flicker. A fraction of a second. Recognition. Then it vanished. Replaced by perfect composure. But Rowan had seen it. And once seen, it could not be unseen. The Duchess knew something. The question was what? Her voice was calm. What is happening here? Nobody answered immediately. Eleanor's gaze shifted to the letter in Rowan's hand. Then back to Thomas. Then to the ring. The ring. The moment she saw it, her face lost color. Not much. Just enough. Again, only Rowan noticed. Because he was watching carefully. Very carefully. The Duchess approached slowly. Her eyes never left the ring. Where did you get that? Thomas hesitated. Then answered honestly. My mother gave it to me. The room fell silent. Eleanor stared. For the first time since entering, her composure cracked. Not completely. But enough. My mother gave it to me. The words seemed to strike her harder than anyone expected. As though they carried meaning hidden from everyone else. She looked away. Quickly. Too quickly. Rowan noticed that too. The Duchess regained control almost immediately. But not before Thomas saw something in her eyes. Pain. Real pain. Not grief for the Duke. Something older. Something deeper. Something she had carried for years. Who was your mother? Eleanor asked quietly. Thomas swallowed. Her name was Amelia. The reaction was immediate. Professor Aldrich nearly dropped his spectacles. One servant gasped. Another crossed herself. And the Duchess froze. Completely. The room became silent enough to hear the rain striking the windows. Amelia. The name clearly meant something. Something important. Something dangerous. Thomas noticed. Rowan noticed. Everyone noticed. Eleanor slowly turned toward the window. For several moments she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded distant. Almost haunted. I haven't heard that name in 17 years. Thomas's heart began pounding. What do you know about her? The Duchess didn't answer immediately. Instead she stared out across the valley. Toward the distant hills. Toward memories she clearly wished remained buried. Finally she spoke. Amelia was my friend. Silence. Nobody had expected that. Not Rowan. Not Aldrich. Certainly not Thomas. Friend. The word felt impossible. The Duchess continued. We grew up together. Thomas blinked. What? Before titles. Before castles. Before politics. Before power. There was a girl named Eleanor. And a girl named Amelia. The room listened carefully. The Duchess rarely spoke about her past. Almost never, yet now the memories seemed to emerge against her will. She was brave. Eleanor said softly. Too brave. A faint smile appeared. Gone almost instantly. She always found trouble. Thomas felt something tighten inside his chest. His mother had never spoken about the Duchess. Not once. Why? Then why did she leave? Thomas asked. The question struck harder than intended. Eleanor's expression darkened. Because she didn't know. Or perhaps because she did. And wished she didn't. One night she disappeared. The room became very still. She left without warning. Without explanation. Without saying goodbye. Thomas frowned. That wasn't what his mother had told him. Not even close. Before he could respond, another voice interrupted. Professor Aldrich. Your Grace. The historian looked nervous. Very nervous. I believe there is something you should see. Eleanor turned. Aldrich produced a second piece of paper. The Duchess frowned. What is that? It was found among the Duke's private documents. Eleanor accepted it. Her eyes moved across the page. Immediately her expression changed. Shock. Then confusion. Then disbelief. What is this? Aldrich swallowed. We discovered it shortly after the funeral. Why wasn't I informed? Because? He hesitated. Because we believed it was forged. The Duchess read the document again. Then again. Her hands began shaking. For the first time all evening, genuine fear appeared on her face. Thomas stared. What is it? No answer. What does it say? Still no answer. Finally Rowan stepped forward. Your Grace. Slowly. Reluctantly. Eleanor handed him the paper. The captain began reading. His heartbeat accelerated. The document was a birth record. 17 years old. Signed by a priest long since dead. Official. Authentic. And impossible. Because according to the record, a child named Thomas had indeed been born 17 years earlier. And under father's name appeared a name that made Rowan's blood run cold. Not Duke Edmund Blackthorne. Not even close. The father listed was Crown Prince Arthur Valemorn. The king's older brother. A man officially declared dead 20 years ago. The room erupted. Questions. Shouts. Disbelief. Impossible. It couldn't be true. The dates made no sense. The history made no sense. Nothing made sense. Yet the document was genuine. Rowan could tell. So could Aldrich. So could Eleanor. Thomas simply stood there. Frozen. His entire world collapsing for the second time in a single day. First he learned the Duke might be his father. Now a royal document claimed someone else entirely. Who was he? Whose son was he? And why did every answer create more questions? Before anyone could process the revelation, the study door burst open. A guard stumbled inside. Out of breath. Terrified. Captain! Rowan turned immediately. What happened? The guard looked ready to faint. His eyes shifted toward Thomas. Then toward the Duchess. Then back to Rowan. The prisoner escaped. What prisoner? The gravekeeper. The room went silent. The old gravekeeper had been the last known person near the Duke's crypt before Thomas's arrest. The only witness. The only person who might know how the ring left the tomb. Rowan's face hardened. How? The guard swallowed. He didn't escape. A chill spread through the room. What do you mean? The man's voice trembled. We found him in the eastern corridor. Dead. Thomas felt his stomach drop. The guard continued. There was a message. Every instinct in Rowan's body screamed danger. What message? The guard's answer froze everyone. Including the Duchess. Including Professor Aldrich. Including Thomas. Because the message had been written in blood across a stone wall. 5 simple words. 5 words that changed everything. The wrong heir has returned. Somewhere deep inside Blackthorne Castle. A hidden door slowly opened. Nobody in the Duke's study heard it. Nobody saw it. Nobody knew that ancient mechanisms, untouched for nearly 2 decades, had begun moving once again. Behind layers of stone and darkness, a single torch suddenly burst into life. As if someone had been waiting. Waiting for a very specific day. Waiting for a very specific person. Waiting for Thomas Blackthorne. The wrong heir has returned. The bloody message echoed through the study like a curse. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The rain battered the windows. Thunder rolled across the valley. Yet Thomas barely heard any of it. His attention remained fixed on those 5 words. The wrong heir. Not an heir. Not the heir. The wrong heir. The implication was obvious. Someone believed another heir existed. Someone believed Thomas didn't belong. And someone was willing to kill to protect that secret. Captain Rowan immediately took command. Seal the castle. The room snapped into motion. Guards rushed from the study. Orders echoed through hallways. Castle bells began ringing. Heavy gates slammed shut. Within minutes Blackthorne Castle transformed into a fortress under siege. No one entered. No one left. The Duchess watched silently. Her face betrayed nothing. But inside, old fears were awakening. Fears she had spent 17 years burying. Because she knew something nobody else in the room knew. Something she had sworn never to reveal. And now the past was returning. Faster than she had imagined possible. Her eyes drifted toward Thomas. The resemblance was becoming impossible to ignore. Not to the Duke. To someone else. Someone she had not seen in nearly 20 years. The realization sent a chill through her body. No. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't. Yet the more she looked, the more certain she became. Hours later. Night had fallen completely over Blackthorne Castle. The corridors had grown quiet. Most servants remained confined to their quarters. Guards patrolled every hallway. Fear lingered throughout the castle like smoke after a fire. Thomas sat alone inside a guest chamber. The room was larger than the entire cottage where he had grown up. A roaring fireplace warmed the stone walls. Soft rugs covered the floor. Expensive paintings hung from every corner. Yet none of it mattered. He couldn't stop thinking about his mother. Amelia. The woman who had raised him alone. The woman who had spent 17 years hiding secrets. The woman who had died without fully explaining who he was. For most of his life, Thomas had accepted the mystery. He had learned not to ask questions. Whenever he mentioned his father, Amelia would grow quiet. Sometimes frightened. Sometimes sad. Always unwilling to answer. Now he finally understood why. She hadn't been protecting herself. She had been protecting him. The realization hurt more than he expected. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Thomas stood. Carefully opened the door. Captain Rowan stood outside. The soldier looked exhausted. Dark circles had appeared beneath his eyes. The events of the day were clearly taking their toll. Yet something else lingered beneath his usual calm. Concern. Genuine concern. For Thomas. "May I come in?" Thomas nodded. The captain entered. Closed the door behind him. For a moment neither spoke. Then Rowan handed him something. A small wooden box. Thomas frowned. "What's this?" "It belonged to your mother." Thomas froze. His heartbeat quickened instantly. "My mother?" Rowan nodded. "We found it among the belongings recovered from your village." Thomas stared at the box. His hand suddenly felt weak. He had never seen it before. The wood appeared old. Worn. Scratched by time. Yet someone had cared for it deeply. Because despite its age, it remained perfectly preserved. "Open it." Thomas swallowed. Slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay 3 objects. A silver key. A faded portrait. And a sealed letter. The air left his lungs. The portrait immediately caught his attention. His hands trembled as he picked it up. It showed a young woman standing beneath a tree. Smiling. Happy. Alive. His mother. Much younger than he remembered. Much happier too. For several moments Thomas simply stared. Then he noticed something. Someone. Standing beside Amelia. A man. His face partially hidden by shadow. But even so, Thomas recognized him instantly. It wasn't the Duke. The realization sent a jolt through his body. Because every story now pointed toward the Duke. Yet the man in the portrait was someone else entirely. Someone younger. Someone unfamiliar. Someone whose face had been deliberately scratched away. As though somebody wanted his identity erased. "Who did that?" Thomas whispered. Rowan frowned. "What?" "The face." The captain examined the portrait. His expression darkened. The scratches looked intentional. Careful. Methodical. Not damage from age. Damage from hatred. Someone had wanted that man forgotten. The question was why. Meanwhile, far beneath Blackthorne Castle, a hooded figure walked through darkness. Torchlight flickered across ancient stone. The hidden passage stretched deeper than most people realized. Deeper than the castle itself. The figure moved confidently. As though they had traveled this path many times before. Eventually the corridor opened into a vast underground chamber. A room forgotten by history. Ancient banners hung from the walls. Dust covered everything. At the center stood a stone table. Upon it rested dozens of documents. Maps. Letters. Family records. Secrets. The hooded figure approached a locked chest. Opened it. Removed a single parchment. And smiled. The time had come. After 17 years? The game was finally beginning. Back inside the guest chamber, Thomas turned his attention toward the sealed letter. His pulse accelerated. His mother's handwriting covered the front. The sight alone nearly broke him. For the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Castle, he felt like a frightened child again. Not an heir. Not a mystery. Just a son who missed his mother. Rowan noticed. And for the first time, he understood something important. Thomas wasn't chasing power. He wasn't chasing titles. He wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing answers. And that made him far more dangerous to the people hiding them. Go ahead, Rowan said quietly. Thomas broke the seal. Carefully unfolded the letter. The words immediately blurred through tears. He blinked. Forced himself to continue. And began reading. My dearest Thomas. If you are reading this, then I have failed. I hoped I would live long enough to tell you everything myself. But there are people who would rather see us dead than allow the truth to be known. If they have found me, they will eventually come for you too. Thomas's hands began shaking. The room felt colder. He continued reading. Listen carefully. Trust your heart before you trust noble titles. Trust actions before words. And trust Captain Rowan Voss. One day he will have to choose between his loyalty and the truth. Rowan froze. What? Thomas looked up. The captain's face had gone pale. My mother knew you. I never met her. Then how did she know your name? Neither had an answer. The implication was impossible. Yet there it was. Written years before her death. As though Amelia had somehow known Rowan would become part of this story. The mystery deepened. Thomas continued reading. Then suddenly stopped. His entire body went rigid. Rowan noticed immediately. What is it? Thomas looked up slowly. Fear filled his eyes. Not ordinary fear. The kind of fear that accompanies life-changing realizations. She left me instructions. What instructions? Thomas stared at the page. Unable to believe what he was reading. Then he spoke. The key. The silver key. Thomas nodded. It opened something hidden beneath our cottage. Rowan frowned. But the cottage burned down. Thomas swallowed. That's not what the letter says. What does it say? Thomas read aloud. The fire was never meant to destroy the cottage. It was meant to destroy what lies beneath it. The room became silent. Thomas continued. Beneath the floorboards is a chamber. Inside are records proving who you truly are. Go there before anyone else does. Rowan's stomach tightened. Because someone had already reached the cottage. Someone had already burned it. Someone had already searched for whatever was hidden there. And if the chamber truly existed, then they were already too late. Or so they thought. Because neither Thomas nor Rowan noticed the final sentence hidden at the bottom of the page. A sentence written so lightly it was almost invisible. A sentence that would soon change everything. 3 words. 3 terrifying words. Don't trust Eleanor. And at that exact moment, in another part of the castle, the Duchess of Blackthorne opened a secret compartment hidden behind her bedroom wall. Inside lay dozens of letters. Letters written by Amelia. Letters nobody else knew existed. Eleanor stared at them for a long moment. Then removed the oldest one. A letter dated 18 years earlier. A letter she had never dared read until now. With trembling hands, she broke the seal. And discovered a name she had hoped never to see again. A name connected to Thomas. A name connected to the crown. A name connected to the Duke's death. The name of a man officially buried 20 years ago. A man who, according to the letter, was still alive. For several seconds, Duchess Eleanor simply stared at the name. The candle beside her flickered. A cold draft slipped through the hidden compartment. Yet she barely noticed. Because the name written on Amelia's letter belonged to a ghost. A ghost the kingdom had buried 20 years ago. A ghost whose death had altered the line of succession itself. A ghost whose return could plunge the realm into civil war. Prince Arthur Valemorn. The king's elder brother. Officially dead. Yet Amelia's final letter claimed otherwise. Eleanor felt her pulse hammering against her ribs. She read the line again. Then again. The words remained unchanged. If anything happens to me, tell Arthur's son the truth. For the first time that night, genuine fear gripped Eleanor Blackthorne. Not fear for herself. Fear for Thomas. Because if Amelia was telling the truth, then the boy sleeping beneath her roof was not merely the center of a family scandal. He was a threat to the crown itself. And people killed for far less. Elsewhere in the castle, Thomas couldn't sleep. Every answer he uncovered seemed to create 10 more questions. His mother's letter lay open before him. The silver key rested beside it. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth. Yet his mind remained trapped in the past. He remembered his mother sitting beside the cottage window during storms. Watching the rain. Always watching. As though expecting someone to appear from the darkness. When he was younger, he had once asked her why. She had smiled sadly. Then replied with words he never understood until now. Some people spend their lives hiding from danger, Thomas. Others spend their lives waiting for it to arrive. At the time, it sounded like a riddle. Now it sounded like a confession. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Not loud. Not urgent. 3 soft taps. Thomas immediately stood. His hand instinctively moved toward the fireplace poker. Something about the knock felt wrong. Too careful. Too deliberate. Slowly he approached the door. Who is it? Silence. The hairs on his neck stood up. Who's there? Nothing. Carefully he opened the door. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. No servant. No guard. Nobody. Thomas frowned. Then noticed something on the floor. A folded piece of paper. His stomach tightened. Slowly he picked it up. The message contained only one sentence. They're watching you from inside the castle. His blood ran cold. He spun around. The corridor remained empty. Yet for the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Castle, Thomas felt certain of something. He was not safe. Not here. Not anywhere. Because someone clearly knew where he was. And someone clearly wanted him afraid. The question was why. At the same moment, Captain Rowan Voss stood in the castle archives. Rows of ancient records surrounded him. Dust-covered forgotten shelves. Thousands of documents filled the chamber. Most dated back centuries. Normally Rowan hated archives. He preferred battlefields. Straightforward problems. Visible enemies. Yet nothing about this situation was straightforward. The answers were buried somewhere in history. And history had become his battlefield. Professor Aldrich moved between shelves carrying stacks of records. His aging face looked exhausted. But beneath the exhaustion lurked excitement. The excitement of a scholar standing on the edge of a discovery. We found something, Aldrich said. Rowan looked up. What? The historian placed 3 documents on the table. Birth records. Travel logs. Royal correspondence. At first glance they seemed unrelated. Then Rowan noticed the dates. Every document referenced the same year. 17 years ago. The year Thomas was born. What am I looking at? Aldrich adjusted his spectacles. The official version of history. Rowan frowned. And? The historian placed another stack beside the first. This is the problem. Rowan examined them. His confusion quickly deepened. The documents contradicted each other. Completely. According to one set of records, Prince Arthur died 20 years ago. According to another, someone continued using his royal seal 3 years after his death. According to one account, Amelia lived in the capital. According to another, she had supposedly died before Thomas was born. The inconsistencies were staggering. Someone altered the archives. Aldrich nodded grimly. Not someone. Who then? The old historian swallowed. Then answered quietly. The Crown. The room fell silent. Even speaking those words felt dangerous. Because if Aldrich was correct, this wasn't a family mystery anymore. This was a state conspiracy. One spanning decades. One involving kings. Far below them. Hidden beneath Blackthorne Castle. The hooded figure returned. This time carrying a lantern. The underground chamber appeared even larger than before. Ancient maps lined the walls. Portraits gathered dust. Names long forgotten filled faded ledgers. The figure approached a stone cabinet. Opened it. Removed a leather-bound journal. The cover bore a familiar symbol. The personal crest of Duke Edmund Blackthorne. Slowly the figure turned the pages. Searching. Searching. Then stopping. A smile appeared beneath the hood. At last. The final piece. The figure tore out several pages. Folded them carefully. Then moved toward the exit. But before leaving, they paused before a portrait hanging in the shadows. The portrait depicted 3 people. A young Duke Edmund. A smiling Amelia. And a third man. A man whose face looked remarkably like Thomas. The hooded figure stared at the painting for a long moment. Then whispered for chilling words. He looks just like him. Near midnight. A royal carriage arrived unexpectedly at Blackthorne Castle. Its arrival caused immediate alarm. The gates opened reluctantly. Guards surrounded the carriage. Nobody had been expecting visitors. Especially not at this hour. A man stepped out. Tall. Well-dressed. Cold-eyed. His black coat bore the royal insignia. Captain Rowan immediately recognized him. Lord Victor Ashcombe. Chief advisor to the king. One of the most powerful men in the kingdom. And one of the most feared. Victor smiled as Rowan approached. But the smile never reached his eyes. I came as quickly as I could. Rowan didn't return the smile. That's interesting. Victor raised an eyebrow. Why? The Duke died 3 days ago. For a brief moment, Victor's smile faltered. Only slightly. Yet Rowan noticed. I was referring to today's developments. His gaze shifted toward the castle. Toward Thomas's room. Toward the center of the storm. Rowan's instincts immediately sharpened. How much does he know? Victor clasped his hands behind his back. The king is deeply concerned. About a stable boy. Victor's eyes hardened. No. The answer came too quickly. Too honestly. Then he corrected himself. About the rumors. But Rowan already understood. The advisor wasn't worried about rumors. He was worried about Thomas. And that frightened Rowan more than he cared to admit. An hour later, Thomas finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. Yet sleep offered no escape. The dream began immediately. He stood inside a forest. Fog covered everything. Silence ruled the trees. Then a voice spoke. A man's voice. Familiar, though Thomas had never heard it before. Find the crown before they do. Thomas turned. A figure stood among the shadows. Tall. Noble. Wearing dark riding clothes. His face remained hidden. Who are you? The figure stepped forward. Slowly. The fog shifted. Thomas caught a glimpse of the man's features. And his breath caught. Because he wasn't looking at a stranger. He was looking at himself. Older. Older and wearing a royal crown. Then another voice suddenly shattered the dream. A woman's voice. Terrified. Desperate. Screaming. Run, Arthur! Everything exploded into darkness. Thomas bolted upright. Sweat covered his face. His heart raced. For several moments he struggled to breathe. Then he heard something. A sound coming from outside his room. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Moving away down the corridor. Thomas rushed to the door. Opened it. The hallway was empty. Except for one thing. A single object resting on the floor. A ring. Another ring. Unlike the Duke's signet. Older. Far older. The metal appeared ancient. Royal. And engraved inside were 3 words. 3 words that made Thomas's blood run cold. Because they matched the name from Amelia's letter. The inscription read, Arthur lives. And somewhere else inside Blackthorne Castle. Lord Victor Ashcombe was reading a report. A report delivered moments earlier by a secret messenger. A report containing information nobody else had yet discovered. He read it once. Then a second time. Slowly. Carefully. His expression darkened. Because the report contained a sentence he had feared for 17 years. A sentence that meant the kingdom was now closer to disaster than ever before. The message read, the second heir has been located. He is already inside Blackthorne Castle. Lord Victor Ashcombe was shaken after reading a secret report confirming that Thomas Blackthorne, a young stable boy at Blackthorne Castle, was only one of several hidden heirs connected to a long-buried royal conspiracy. For 17 years, Victor believed the kingdom's darkest secret had been safely buried. Now, Thomas's arrival threatened to expose everything. As Victor gazed across the sleeping castle, he realized Thomas was searching for answers. And people who searched for answers rarely survived. Elsewhere, Captain Rowan Voss examined a mysterious signet ring engraved with the words, Arthur lives. The impossible inscription suggested that Prince Arthur Valemorn, officially declared dead 2 decades earlier, had survived. Professor Aldrich Thorne soon arrived with an ancient census record revealing another shocking discovery: Thomas was not the only child hidden 17 years ago. A second infant had been secretly moved between villages under a false identity before disappearing completely from official records. Aldrich believed Duke Edmund Blackthorne himself had concealed the child's existence. Meanwhile, Duchess Eleanor Blackthorne found herself haunted by memories of Amelia, Thomas's mother. She remembered a stormy night filled with fear, blood, and Amelia's desperate warning that if they'd found the child, he would be killed. As forgotten memories resurfaced, Eleanor realized there had not been one hidden baby, but 2. Even more disturbing, someone appeared to have deliberately erased part of her memory, leaving her unable to recall the full truth. Later that night, Thomas heard scratching behind the stone fireplace in his room. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a dusty leather journal left behind by Duke Edmund. The journal described dangerous conspiracies inside the royal court and contained an astonishing confession: Duke Edmund had met Prince Arthur years after Arthur's supposed death. Even more unbelievable, Arthur had not been murdered, he had willingly disappeared. Before Thomas could continue reading, a terrified scream echoed through the castle. Guards discovered the body of an unknown servant girl pinned to a wall with a dagger marked by the Black Crown, the symbol of the long-forgotten Brotherhood of the Hollow Crown. Clutched in her hand was a coded parchment revealing a far greater secret: there were 3 hidden heirs, not 2. Someone was hunting them before they could uncover their true identities. The symbols on the parchment awakened more buried memories in Eleanor. She suddenly remembered a hidden monastery where she had once seen 3 cradles, confirming that the conspiracy was far larger than anyone had imagined. The realization left her questioning how much of her own past had been manipulated. As fear spread through the castle, Rowan asked Thomas about Amelia. Thomas recalled the bedtime story she told him every night about a king who searched for his lost crown, only to discover he had given it away willingly. Rowan immediately recognized the story's similarity to the Duke's journal, strengthening the belief that Prince Arthur had voluntarily vanished to protect an even greater secret. Deep beneath Blackthorne Castle, a mysterious hooded figure wandered through ancient tunnels lined with portraits of royal children. 2 portraits remained intact, but the third had disappeared, confirming that someone else had uncovered the hidden truth. At dawn, a royal messenger arrived with urgent news. The king was coming to Blackthorne Castle immediately. Rowan understood that kings did not abandon their court without reason. The king already knew something about the hidden heirs, and his arrival signaled that events were moving faster than anyone expected. Returning to the Duke's journal, Thomas discovered a detailed map leading to a remote monastery hidden in the northern mountains. The journal instructed him to seek Brother Matthias, claiming the truth began there. Duchess Eleanor then revealed that Brother Matthias was not a monk but the man who had delivered all 3 heirs into the world. If he still lived, he alone knew which child was the kingdom's rightful heir. Before anyone could absorb the revelation, horns echoed across the castle. Hundreds of royal guards escorted the king's carriage through the gates. Riding beside the king was a man wearing a silver mask, a man Captain Rowan recognized instantly. According to every official record, the masked man had died 20 years earlier. Yet he was alive, watching Thomas with a knowing smile as the greatest secret in the kingdom prepared to unfold.